So I love this. This is something I've actually been trying to experiment with on my own in two ways. One is kind of have this scratch pad or memory that the model can record things in and then retrieve information from using MCP. And the other being adding additional context. So basically being able to use another model when you run into a problem to extend it more. Anthropic released this March 20th, 2025, and they call it the Think Tool, which basically enables Claude to stop and just do additional thinking. Now, this is a little bit different than extended thinking, and they go into the details here. So let me jump into just a little bit of those details, and I want to show you the demo that I've been working on myself and get your feedback on how we can maybe improve this even more. So what is the Think Tool? With the Think Tool, we're giving Claude the ability to include an additional thinking step, complete with its own designated space as part of getting to its final answer. So while it sounds similar to extended thinking, it is a different concept. Remember, extended thinking is basically kind of like a reasoning model. It's part of its thought process before it formulates a final answer. What the Think tool is it's pretty much like any other tool that you actually have when you're using like root code or any of the tool calling applications that you may be running. At a certain point, it decides it needs to do more processing. It's a really, really interesting strategy here. They say we recommend using extended thinking for simpler tool use scenarios like non-sequential tool calls or straightforward instruction following. So this would basically be like a one-shot prompt. Hey, I want to go create a fully functional game of something. And it's just going to create a single file. But in more complex situations, the Think tool could actually be really incredible. Now, I actually have a use case in production that I want to try to implement this into, but I haven't got it fully working the way I want yet. This specification format comes from Tbench. They name it Think. The description they give it is use the tool to think about something. It will not obtain new information or change databases, but it will just append the thought to the log. And basically to use it when complex reasoning or some cache memory is needed. And this is what really intrigued me about this because the cache memory and the complex reasoning, I had been thinking about those in two different problems. So I had built like this MCP memory bank that I've been testing, and I've been having the LLM like write information into it and then retrieve it back. It honestly has not been useful, so I haven't released anything on it. It just doesn't work very well. But then I had also been working on the idea of using a cheaper model and then calling like an expensive model, a reasoning model when it needed to. And that's been interesting. But I will say MCP tool calling in general is kind of wonky. And I've had a hard time getting it to call it when I want to. The cool thing about this, though, is if you use think plus prompt, it actually performs better than extended thinking. So it's going to be more costly because you're calling out to another model. But at the same time, you can get better performance from that. So I believe there is more to it that we can actually do with this by fine-tuning the prompt, figuring out how we pass context in properly, potentially even having specific tools related to the problem at hand to rather than it just being a think tool, maybe it is a tool to a specific task of some kind, which I also find very interesting. And the very interesting thing to me is you can use different models. So the example I want to show you here, I'm in Claude Desktop. The tool I have enabled is thinking. Now this is one that I wrote, and it does not follow exactly what Anthropic has released. But I've tried to use a lot of their prompts because I'm assuming that they've done a better job with the prompt building than I have. So if I go to the top, you can see this prompt that I've copied in here. I've changed it a little bit, but not much. This comes directly from this, this website, which I'll have linked in the description below. Using the Think tool before taking any action or responding to the user after receiving tool results, use the Think tool as a scratch pad too, and it goes through the particular thing. And then it gives a couple examples on it. Now, what I've set up in code is a few things. So I've got my branding guide, which I've revealed in other videos, which I freaking love this, by the way. This is my favorite MCP that I've built so far. Here's my thinking server. Now, I've changed this pretty drastically, but I think it works fairly well. I'm actually using OpenRouter, and currently I'm using OpenAI O3 Mini. Now I'm going to get rid of this key immediately after this video, so don't worry about that. You could type it in, but it's not going to work. So I'm using O3 Mini. I've created a MCP tool called Thinking, and I basically give it that same prompt that it had in that article about when to use the tool. Ultimately, what I'm doing in this particular case is I'm using O3 Mini to elaborate on the result. Now, this is the prompt that I need to work on the most because I don't think this is good enough yet. But basically, I say you are assisting a user in thinking about complex topics. The user will pass in his thoughts. You will break down the problem and help add valuable context to the thoughts. So very, very basic. I think this needs the most work. But let me show you what this looks like in practice. Remember, I did give it at the beginning this prompt so it knows about the MCP Think tool. This is the thing that I struggle with in general. I really wish there was a way to like save out prompts in Claude Desktop. But in general, I just have like a Notion with a bunch of these saved over and I just copy and paste them in. Now, I asked it this question, which was basically a question I had Grok generate for me. I'm not worried about anything right now other than testing it and getting that MCP working end to end. And then I want to do some real testing on some problems it can't do, pre this, and then have it figure out, does this actually help it solve the problem better? Now, this actually looks like a normal result, but notice that it says view result from Thinking Tool. So you can actually see the data that actually came back from the Thinking Tool. And the response is not bad. So let me show you what this looks like when I run it. So here is another problem that I had Grok generate for me. And it's basically the quantum vault problem or quantum vault dilemma. So here's what it does. So now you may think this is actually calling out to O3 Mini right now. It's really not. This is actually Claude generating what it's going to send to O3 Mini or to the Thinking Tool in general. So this is all being generated by Claude currently to go into the thoughts process of O3 Mini. And it's still continuing here. Okay, so now here is the response from O3 Mini. It basically takes all of the context that was given to it in the thoughts that came through in the MCP and then broke it down additionally with more context and then gave it a few additional points to consider. And in a conclusion, it says your adaptive strategy is the most promising. Start with a guaranteed low risk portion. This is very fascinating to me. So now I'm working across two very different models to basically complement one another. I've done this with R1 already, and that is also very promising to me. I really want to try this with code at some point here shortly too. And then we get the final answer here. Now, whether this is right or not, I do not know. To me, the video is more about the Think tool in general and the possibilities of what this opens up. I plan tomorrow to take what I've been working on today and try it with code. If it's really good or worth sharing, I'll make another video on that. And then I ultimately think if I can make it good enough, I may actually try building a local version of root code and have the Think tool as a tool option in there and see if it makes sense for me to even do a PR for that, if that's something they're even interested in. So to wrap this up a little bit, I'm actually really excited about this. I love that they kind of formulated more something that I had already been testing locally, and they actually have some real tests around it. And, I'm pretty new to building my own MCPs, but I've gotten pretty good at using fast MCPs, so I can crank them out pretty quick now. The idea I had originally is I can take a cheap model and then have it go off and do work when needed with the more expensive model. And then I was thinking there are some models that I have that are just better at certain things. So, for example, right now I have like this manual mode where I go through and I say, hey, plan the entire project, do a PRD on this. What if I could actually build tools that go and do that automatically for me using different models that I know are cheaper and will do it just as well? And then I had this idea about this memory that the MCP tool could capture memory and we could assign sort of this context ID to some sort of conversation that's happening. And that context ID could be utilized to pull in and out memory between different models. So basically, different models would all connect to that same MCP server and be able to get kind of this corpus of data that's been collected across all of the models that work together. I'm still very interested in that. I just have not got it working great yet. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on this. Have you had any chance to try out something like this? I don't know if there is an actual way to implement this today in Claude. Like, I don't think they've released anything. I think this is more of an idea. But if they have and I missed it, please let me know in the comments below. Anyway, I appreciate you all if you made it till the end. Until next time, everyone. Peace out.